Egypt sermon series, continuing on through the book of Egypt. And this week, we're going to see a few things. The question we're asking is not just what does God save us from, but what does he save us to? Who does God use to bring about God's will and God's plan? And what situations does God use? We're going to see all of that today. We're going to see the people he works with, the situations he works in, and the ultimate goal that God has in his story as we begin to slowly move through the big epic story that is the Exodus movement. Years ago, maybe almost 10 years ago now, I was preaching in a small church in southern Oklahoma, and one night, this is the kind of small town in southern Oklahoma that nothing really happens at nighttime. Most of the people in this city all work at the same steel mill in town or steel manufacturing plant in town. And so to be the minister that gets a call late at night is always dreadful. It's never good news because this is one of those towns where everybody's got to get up at like 5 a.m. And so everybody's already in bed. And one evening I get a phone call. There's one of the elders in the church, and he says, so-and-so, a young teenage boy in our youth group, has taken his own life. And some of us are going up to the church building, and we're just gonna gather together. We're gonna pray. And I'm leaving the house, and they say, we don't really know what to do. We don't really know what to say, but we're just gonna encourage each other. We're gonna pray together, and maybe if you've got a verse or two that you can read, then come on. And I'm leaving the house. I'm very aware that it's in ministry, you do so many things that don't really matter. I mean, you do so much stuff that's like, maybe God can use it. And then every once in a while, there's those moments where it just matters. You're walking into something, and the words that you say carry weight and makes a difference. And you just know you're walking into that moment. We get there to the church building, and so many people from the church and so many people from the community showed up because they just didn't know where else to go. And the church building began filling up, and we're praying together. We're looking at scripture together. We're trying to make sense of this awful thing that has happened in this small town and in this small church. And I say that to ask the question, why is it that in times of tragedy, in times of crisis, in national crisis, church buildings are filled? Why is it, for those of you that are old enough to remember this like I do, why is it that when things happen like 9/11, all of a sudden there's this big surge of people wanting to seek answers that are bigger than themselves, and all of a sudden after 9/11, just every church building was packed. Everybody was like, we need to come back to the Lord. And why is it in your life, when your life gets turned upside down and your life stops making sense, that it's finally the motivation that you go, maybe I need to go to church. Maybe I need to seek some answers somewhere else. And at least part of the answer is this. At least part of the answer is no matter if you're the biggest cynic, the biggest doubter, if you're not a Christian in the room right now, if you're watching this online, doesn't matter if you're still wrestling through your doubts and you're like, I'm an atheist, I don't even believe in God, I don't trust the Bible, I don't put my faith in any of that stuff. You are a person of faith. You are betting your life on something, and it might not be God, it might not be religious principles, it might not be the teachings of the Bible, but you yourself, even if you're a person of science and a person of reason, you are building your life, staking your life on some kind of a truth claim. And we will lay the foundation of our life on our career sometimes. We'll lay our life, we will bet our future on, if I can have the right spouse, the right husband, the right wife, if God will give me the family that I'm looking for. And we will ask ourselves, like, what are the things that I need for my life to make sense, for my life to matter much, to count for anything? And we will begin putting our faith in those things and those systems and those institutions. And then something happens. And we realize we have less control than we think we do. We're less secure than we thought we were. We have, that the things we worship, the things we put our faith and our trust in are less worthy than we previously thought. And when everything comes crashing down in a moment of panic, in a moment of crisis, or in a moment of tragedy, we find ourselves, the things I've worshiped, The things I put my faith and trust in, what I believe to be true about the world is beginning to show the cracks of the foundation, and all at once our heart goes, I need to worship something better. The whole Exodus story is God using hard seasons, moments of pain and moments of tragedy to reveal to us how often we build our lives worshiping the wrong things, putting our faith in the wrong gods, and it's often our lowest moments where we realize, I've built my life, I've been climbing the wrong ladder. I've built my life trying to make my life around this, and when that turns out to be a lousy God, like with 9/11, I'll say it this way, I heard somebody on social media say this. They're like, have you noticed that when we go to war with Iran or for whatever it is, the people in other countries, when they go to war, are terrified that they're going to be bombed, that they're going to be invaded, that their security is threatened. America, when we go to war, we are afraid that gas prices are going to go up. Right? Like we have insulated ourselves from the idea that it's ever going to be a threat on our soil. Like we put so much faith and trust in our institutions, in our own ability to protect ourselves, that when something happens in our nation, and all of a sudden we feel like, man, the things I've been using to protect me maybe don't keep me as safe as I thought I did. The things I've been using to build my life on, relationships or career or achievement or influence or power or money or comfort or just fleeting hobbies for happiness, whatever it is we build our life on, when it begins to crumble, when the stock market turns, when the person that you love walks away, when the career that you thought defined you and gave you a sense of purpose and identity ends tragically and you have to rebuild yourself, all of a sudden you realize we have been worshiping the wrong gods, and we learn that freedom is not about being delivered from the things that bind you, from the things that oppress you, but rather being delivered to that which actually sets you free. Like, what if you could build your life where you worship not career, not status, not reputation. You trust in not money, not security, not what you can buy for yourself to protect yourself. You're putting your faith in not the institutions of man, but something deeper and more secure. That what if what God is trying to do in your life is go, I'm the God you worship. And I know you think that if you can get free of that bondage, you can get free of that sin, that you'll be okay. But it's not until you find your freedom in worshiping me. And I know that sounds big and far-fetched and like I just made a big theological jump, but before we dive into the Exodus story, we're going to cover 2 chapters today. Let me just ask you the question. Some of you grew up watching the movie. You've seen the 10 Commandments. Charlton Heston, Moses goes up to Pharaoh. He looks at Pharaoh and he says, "Let my people go." The part that doesn't make the movie is the rest of that sentence. What does he say? Let my people go so that, anybody know it? So that they can serve me. We see that. So that they can worship me. So they can make sacrifices to me. Every time there's a so that. I'm not trying to rescue you out of your place of slavery. I'm not trying to rescue you out of bondage. I'm trying to deliver you from that so that you are free to worship that which actually sustains you, that which actually is true and good and lovely. I'm not trying to get you to have a better life. I'm trying to get you to worship the right things. Let my people go so that they can worship me. What we're going to see as we begin to dive into Exodus is all of the Exodus story is God reminding you, I'm who gets you there. I am he in whom you are fully seen, fully known, and fully loved. And as long as you worship and put your faith and trust in other things, you will always be enslaved by your own insecurities, by your own anxieties, by your own worries, by your own doubts, and by your own struggles. You're always going to be a slave to yourself and the culture you're in until you begin to worship that which is actually good for you. Jesus says, let my people go. God says, let my people go that they may worship me. And what we're going to see in Moses' story is who he uses to make that possible for you, the situations he uses to make that possible for you, and what all of this is actually pointing towards in the end. Exodus chapter 1, as we dive in, this is what we see. We're going to skip around a little bit. The first 7 verses is just reminding us where we left off in Genesis. The Israelites are now in Egypt. Joseph got there first. Everybody else joined him later. We pick up in verse 7. All of the Israelites have managed to spend a generation, pick up in verse 7, to spend a generation in Egypt. Is anybody running slides back there? Who's back there? Who's back there? I see somebody's head. Who is that? There we go. Okay. But the Israelites were exceedingly fruitful. Okay. Israelites are in the land. There's been a famine in their land. They come to Egypt, and Egypt's like, hey, we'll take you. We've got plenty of food for everybody. We have entire cities that are just granaries for all the food. And as long as you're willing to work and build nice things for us, you can stay here as long as you like. And within one generation, the people of God forget about God, stop worshiping God, and the people of Egypt forget about the Israelites and stop favoring them because of Joseph. And so the Israelites are exceedingly fruitful. They multiply greatly. They increase in numbers. They become so numerous that the land was full of them. And then a new king of Egypt, to whom Joseph meant nothing, came to power in Egypt. If you've been a part of our Genesis series, remember Joseph is the guy who his brothers sell him into slavery. He starts out in the pit. He goes from the pit to the prison. And by the end of his story, he goes from the prison to the palace. He is second in command. Everything he touches is blessed by God, and he's fruitful. Pharaoh recognizes it and is like, this is my boy. Give him power, give him access, give him status, give him whatever he needs to do to manage my stuff really well. And then within one generation, God's people have so assimilated to the culture they're in, they no longer look like their people. They're no longer sacrificing to their own gods. And within one generation, the favor that they had with Pharaoh is gone. There's a new regime in town. Let me just ask, what happens when you put your faith and trust in a certain leader, a teacher, a pastor, a political leader, whatever it is, and then they leave and they turn out not to be as good to you as you thought that they were going to be, and the big change and the big turnover that happens and all of that. And so this new king, Joseph and his people mean nothing to him. And he looks down at all these Israelites that are reproducing quickly and rapidly, and like their families are so blessed, and he begins to get nervous. And so he says in the next verse, the Israelites have become far too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them. Verse 10. Or they will become even more numerous. And if war breaks out, they'll join our enemies, they'll fight against us, they'll leave the country. So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor. They built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for Pharaoh. And so they basically have entire cities where all they do is work, and they store up grain and they make bricks. And the entire structure of this city is it's a place for these other migrant nations to live and to work and to serve underneath the oppression of the Egyptian slaveholders and taskmasters. And so we'll talk more. Remember these words. We'll talk more about Pithom and Ramses later. There's some cool archaeology that we have discovered that helps illuminate these stories. And when we get closer to talking about Moses parting the Red Sea, we're going to pick up right here with these two cities. But for now, the more the people were oppressed in verse 12, the more they were multiplied and spread. And let me just tell you, in every country throughout the last 2,000 years of church history, you show me a place where Christianity is oppressed. You show me a place where God's people are oppressed, and I will show you a nation where the church is growing. And you show me a place where Christians, the people of God, get fat and happy and comfortable, and they stop worshiping their God, and I'll show you a place where Christianity is in decline in the nation. And so it's true, the more they oppress the people, the more God multiplies them, the more they spread out. And so the Egyptians come to dread the Israelites and worked them ruthlessly, it says. And look at verse 14. I'm going to show you my literal translation of verse 14. Let me pull it up. They made their lives bitter with harsh labor in brick and mortar and with all kinds of works in the fields. In all their harsh labor, the Egyptians worked them ruthlessly. They were ruthless towards the Israelite people. There's a word here that's used again and again. It's very redundant, which is why we have to find synonyms when we translate it so that it makes sense in English. A very literal reading of the Hebrew would go something like, they made their lives bitter with serving, with brick and mortar and with every kind of serving. And with all kinds of serving, they made them serve. That's the literal translation. That's how many times you see the word like servant in the terms of like slavery and oppression. It's again and again in this verse. This is what their lives become. These were God's favored people. These were God's people in the promised land. And a generation later, their entire life feels like they are in slavery to everything that they have built their lives on. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, so this is what he does. We keep working them hard. I know I'm skipping around a little bit as we work through this. We're going to skip some chunks. But he says, we work them really hard. We hope that slows them down. If we don't give them time to build strong families, then maybe we can just assimilate them into our culture, make them the slaves that we think they deserve to be, and that'll be just fine. And they keep growing. So finally, the Pharaoh has had enough of it. And he says, this is what you're going to do. Tell the midwives that when the baby is born, if it's a boy, kill it. If it's a girl, let it live. This is kind of common throughout ancient cultures and ancient history. Infanticide, the death of infants as a way of having enough to be able to provide for yourself. So you would see poor families, if they have too many kids, they would leave them out by the river and go, God, if you save them, that's on you, but, it's out of my hands, right? Very common. Normally, it was the boys that would be left to live, and it was the girls that wouldn't. We actually have some writings around Jesus' time of an Egyptian businessman writing back to his wife and going, hey, congratulations on the pregnancy. If it's a boy, let it live. Like, that's kind of his idea about it. What he says is it's just the opposite. He goes, we don't ever want them to raise an army. If it's a boy, kill him. But if it's a woman, we'll do what Egypt's really good at. Just let the women assimilate into our culture. We've got all these Egyptian princes, and every Egyptian prince that's in the Pharaoh's palace had multiple wives and concubines and servants and all of this. And so within a generation, we will wipe out the Israelite people. Their women will be assimilated into our culture. They will marry our men, and they will produce Egyptian children. And within one generation, Egypt will be bigger, and Israel will be no more. That's Pharaoh's plan. When you're helping the Hebrew women during childbirth on delivery stool, if you see that the baby's a boy, kill him. And if it's a girl, let her live. The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. And what's the next word? Back up one, sorry, I lost my place. Yep, they let the boys live, and when the midwives, verse 19, we'll get there. Oh, I'm so lost. Yep, the midwives answered Pharaoh. I'm all turned around. Stay with me. Back up one. Okay, let me just read it. Let me just read it straight, and then, okay. The midwives, however, feared God. That's what I'm looking for. The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. Every once in a while, the moment I look at the screen on the back of the wall, she changes it, and then it's not. And then when I look back up here, it's changed back, and then I'm lost just because I'm looking in the wrong spot. So this is what I want to say, guys. Look at verse 17 right here. Romans chapter 13 says, submit yourselves to your earthly kings, to your government. That you should be good citizens of your nation. You should pay your taxes, and you should follow the laws of the land. You're commanded to do that in Romans 13. What do you do when the culture, when the institutions, when the legal system around you comes up with commandments that are the opposite of what God calls you to do? And here's what I'll say. Romans 13, he tells you, the reason why you follow the laws of the land is because God's ultimately in control, and God's the one who appoints kings, and God's the one who gets his will done no matter who's in charge. And so submit to your government, because in submitting to your government, in a way, you are submitting to God. And yet sometimes it's evident that to submit to your country is not to submit to God, and everything is upside down, and the commandments don't make sense. And so what do you do? And these midwives, how do I want to say this? Over a decision of whether or not it's right or wrong, and maybe you could say a decision of whose right is it to even make this choice, they have a choice to end a life of a baby or not. And before it's a political issue, before it's a legal issue, before it's an issue of rights and your rights and the baby's rights and all of that, before we ever get to any of that, underneath all of that is a moral issue. And these midwives go, look, the culture can have their laws, the Pharaoh can have his laws, but we fear God over man. The midwives feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told him to do. They let the boys live. Let me say, God's people are delivered from Egypt in some ways, in no small part, because of some fearless, God-fearing, bold midwives who would rather honor God that they barely remember and barely know than submit to the king of Egypt, who will have their head if they find out what they've done. And here's the beautiful part of this text. Can we go back to verse 14 for just a moment? The best part about this text, what I love about this in verse 15 is what I'm looking for. Look at this. Midwives in this culture, and we know it's true for these midwives as well because we're about to see it in a little bit. When they are faithful to God, the next verse says that because of their faith and because they trusted God, God blesses them with a family. At that time, often it was the midwives were the women who weren't able to have kids. And because they couldn't have kids, they were kind of reduced to like second-class citizens. But if you're an Israelite in Egypt, you're already a second-class citizen. So to be a barren woman that cannot have kids in Egypt is to be the lowest of the lows. You're the most powerless, most insignificant. You don't have a family of your own. The best job you can hope to have is maybe raise kids in somebody else's family. These are the people that history usually forgets about. We never know their names. They're the small, insignificant people that never make the history books, and yet in God's plan, by God's design, again and again in Scripture, he chooses not the firstborn son, but the secondborn son. He chooses Cain, not Abel, and Jacob, not Esau, and Isaac, not Ishmael. And again in Scripture, he chooses not the prosperous, not the people in position, not the women of virtue and nobility, but the overlooked, the barren. He chooses Sarah. He chooses, and not Hagar. He doesn't just choose the women that the culture calls barren. He chooses the women that the culture would never call beautiful. You see that with Rachel and Leah again and again. And here now, in this moment, history is moved. The world as we know it is changed forever. God uses this moment to end up delivering his people to his promised land and away from Egypt because these two ladies, the lowest of the low, the most insignificant, the people who have spent their lives feeling unworthy and insignificant and lacking in position and lacking in power, are the very people that God uses to go, don't you know, these are the people. I always use the outsiders. I always use the overlooked. I always use the broken. I always use the barren. I always use the secondborn. I always use the unlikely. The Bible tells us in the New Testament, he says, I use the foolish to shame the wise. I use the weak to shame the strong. I always use people like this. And here we are 4,000 years later, and the best Egyptologists and anthropologists in the world debate over which king was Pharaoh at the time, like the name of Pharaoh. We don't know who the king of Egypt is, but we know who the names of the midwives. Do you see that there? The two people that the world expected to forget are the very people that God uses, and 4,000 years later, we still recognize the name of Shiphrah and Puah. And here's the beautiful part. We actually, 1800 BC, we have the fragment of papyrus that dates back to 1800 BC, so almost 4,000 years ago. We find a list of names in an Egyptian household, and they're just the names of the servants of the household, and one of the midwives in Egypt is named Shiphrah. Now, we don't know if it's the same woman. We do know that it's a Hebrew name. We do know that she was a midwife around this time period in Egypt. And that's my reminder to you that these are real names of real people in history that made a difference. As much as the culture will try to tell you that the Bible is myth and tall tales, we have so much of this evidence that illuminates the story and reminds us God has always used the unlikely and the overlooked. He's always used the last people you would ever expect. If you spent your life feeling insignificant, if other people have told you that you're worthless, that your life hasn't amounted to much, or if you're just one of those people that you have the negative self-talk in the back of your head, making you feel anxious, making you feel insecure, and telling you that you're not enough, let me remind you, we don't know who the Pharaoh was, but we know who the midwives were. They showed up, they disobeyed the king, and they changed the world. I'll ask you another one. This is one of my favorite examples of what this looks like today. And this is me saying, I'm quoting somebody when I say it like this, but it's a good way to say it. There is a biblical case for creative civil disobedience in the face of social injustice. If you're a Christian, a part of the call for Christ is to get into trouble, is to disobey ungodly kings and ungodly rules. It's to push against culture. It's to be the person that finds a creative way, not in a mean way, not in a violent way, not always even in a noisy way, but to find some way to creatively disobey your civic duty in an effort to confront the social injustices in front of you. And I know, like, the moment I say that, some of you are going, uh-oh, this sounds very progressive, this sounds very liberal. And this is my point, guys, that in the days of Mao in China, in the days of Stalin in Russia, in the days of Hitler in Germany, we have many examples of totalitarian regimes, and we have many examples of Christians working against them silently in small ways, doing their part to say, we fear God, not man, and this will not stand. And so in the days of Nazi Germany, you have amazing preachers like Dietrich Bonhoeffer that's preaching the gospel on Sunday morning, and the rest of the week he's plotting, he's part of the assassination plots against Hitler. Like, he's literally trying to end World War II during the week, and then on Sunday morning he's preaching the gospel. And you have guys like Dostoevsky who are writing from the point of view of faith in the middle of totalitarian regimes, and every time you have a totalitarian government trying to tell you you cannot practice religious freedom, being a Christian is radical and progressive and liberal in the face of that culture. And in cultures, in Western cultures, where it's not, we're not seeking freedom from totalitarianism, we're seeking the kind of freedom that goes, I'm my own God, and nobody gets to tell me what to do, and I'm such an individual, and I don't submit to the God of the Bible, and I don't submit to other people's laws because I'm a free person, and I get to do what I want. And in the face of those cultures, Christianity looks liberal and progressive. I said it backwards earlier. You guys I'm going to move on. You guys get my point. I'll make it here. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, whose name were Shiphrah and Puah, and let me just say, there are many small nobodies in the world that the world remembers, and we remember their names because they disobeyed ungodly laws in times when it was right for Christians to push back against the culture around them. How many of you guys, have you ever heard a speech, raise your hand if you ever heard a speech by a man named John Lewis called Good Trouble? Anybody familiar with it? I see some hands going up. Okay, a couple of hands going up. I'm just going to point it out, and it's going to be weird without context, but both of the hands that were raised were women of color in the room, and that's important for the sake of the story, because now's the one where everybody gets to raise their hand. How many of you have heard of a speech by a man named Martin Luther King Jr. called I Have a Dream? I see all the hands going up. Okay, here's the reason why you don't remember the John Lewis speech. Because 5 minutes after John Lewis gave the best, most important speech of his life, MLK got up and delivered I Have a Dream. And as a preacher and communicator, I think often about what it would be like to preach my very best sermon ever, just to end up opening for somebody who's just about to come blow me out of the water, right? But John Lewis, it's such a good speech, and it's good, and it stands on its own. It just gets overshadowed by MLK and his speech, I Had a Dream. They're both great. But John Lewis, 1963, it's the March on Washington. He's part of a college program that's helping black voters get transportation to go to the voting booth. And while the whole world, this is a part of his speech, the whole world, he says, is saying, you can have your freedom, just be patient. John Lewis is famous for saying, we want freedom, and we want it now. And so we will not be patient. We will march, and we will march in the streets of Cincinnati. We will march in the streets of Birmingham, and we will march in the streets of Washington because we want freedom, and we have it now. And then he said this, He said, it is your moral and spiritual obligation, especially if you're a Christian, to get into good trouble. That's the line. I love that line. As somebody that grew up playing punk music, being as rebellious as I could be, I love the idea that sometimes it is godly and right to get into good trouble. Sometimes he goes, look, in the face of social injustice, in the face of laws that oppress people, in the face of systemic slavery, in the face of your own bondage and your own negative self-talk, you do the hard things to say, I don't fear man, I don't fear Pharaoh, I don't fear kings, I don't fear presidents, I fear the God of the universe, and therefore I'm willing to get into good trouble. I will lift people up even when it costs me. I will serve people and love others, even if it means getting rejected by my culture. I will honor Christ, even if that means getting rejected by cultural Christianity and their interpretation of what that looks like. I will look after the underdogs. I will provide for those who can't provide for themselves. I will do right by others. And even if other people are going, they're not one of us, they don't belong here, get rid of them, kick them out, and kill them, Christians have always been the people who go, I'll love them. I'll take them in. I will do my part. And as long as the government allows me to do that, we will submit to the laws of the government. And the moment the culture turns or the moment the legal system turns, then we will get into good trouble and make sure that we have creative ways to cause civic disobedience in the face of unjust social systems. So then he says, kill them if they're a boy. Let them live if they're a girl. These midwives say, we're not going to do it. It's wrong. It's against God. And so he calls them to him in the next verse. He says, why have you done this? Why have you let them live? And this is why I say creative civil disobedience. If they protest, if they picket right now, they're gone. They're dead, right? And so they don't. They go, well, the problem is, these Hebrew women, they're just gritty, man. They've got some strength to them. And so he says in the next verse, he says, in verse 19, he says, Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They're vigorous. They give birth before the midwives arrive, right? Their whole defense is they're like, we were going to, and then when we got there, the baby was already born. Like, sorry, we missed our chance. Like, it's on you guys now. And so Pharaoh doubles down. He goes, it's on us? Okay, here's what we're going to do then. Now it's the law for all people, Hebrew or not, that if you see a Hebrew baby boy, it's your job to take him and throw him in the Nile. And it doesn't matter if you're an Egyptian or a Hebrew. If you see a Hebrew baby boy, get rid of him. And it's in that situation that God begins to work. First, he redeems the people. Verse 20. So God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. Now, it's in this situation we get into chapter 2. And a man of the tribe of Levi, that's the birth line of Jesus, a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. It's an interesting verse, but let's try to talk about it for a moment. You can imagine being a pregnant Hebrew woman at this time, and you spend 9 months going, if it's a boy, what am I going to do? If it's a boy, I'll get murdered if I get caught with him. I know I can't keep him. What am I going to do? And the baby is born, and like loving moms to children, she takes one look at this baby and goes, he's beautiful. It's beautiful. This translation says, when she saw that he was a fine child. Your translation might use the word beautiful. When she saw that he was beautiful, she looks at him, her heart goes out to him, she's in love. And so she does what good moms do. She goes, I'll just hide him. I'll do what I can. I'll keep him safe as long as I possibly can. And eventually he gets too big to hide. And so she comes up with another creative way to cause civil disobedience. She decides, okay, I'm going to obey. I'm just going to obey carefully, right? And so after she hides him for 3 months, when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him. She coated it with tar and pitch, placed the child in it, and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. And so she goes, okay, well, I will put my baby in the river. I'm going to make a basket for him. I'm going to hide him amongst the reeds so maybe he doesn't get noticed. And I'm going to choose specifically a place in the river where I know the Egyptian princesses come out to come and bathe. And maybe God will work and somebody that can actually save him will have mercy on him. So his sister, this would be Miriam, stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. And Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. Just to remind you, because I know when we read stories like this, it's easy to think that this is myth and fairy tale. This is the most believable part of the story. In a world where Egyptian princesses had multiple wives and multiple concubines and multiple servants, there is no short supply of Egyptian princesses. There's so many daughters of Pharaoh, and they come out to bathe in the Nile River, and the Hebrew women know where they bathe, and so they kind of set this up, and they put the baby there, and here she is walking along the riverbank. She sees the basket amongst the reeds, and she sends her female slave, to go get it. She opened it, she saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew babies, she said. See, even her heart goes out to this baby. And as she's realizing it's a Hebrew baby, she's like, oh no, like what are we supposed to do? It's a Hebrew baby. We're supposed to throw it in the river, right? Miriam runs out. She shows up to Pharaoh's daughter. She says, shall I go get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? I just so happen to know this Hebrew girl who's a capable wet nurse. She's breastfeeding, but she doesn't happen to have a baby of her own to breastfeed. I don't know what happened, right? Let me just say, nobody's fooled in this story. Nobody's fooled, right? The Hebrew princess understands what's going on. She understands she's the one who could take him in, who could raise him as her own. And so she approves. She goes, okay, do it. Go get the wet nurse that we all kind of know as mom, and let her take care of this baby, and I'll say I'm the mom, and I'll be responsible. Again, this is not unusual. What Egypt was very good at during this time is when they took over another land, when they invaded another nation, they didn't kill everybody. They said if you're the chieftain or if you're the king of that nation, then your firstborn son is going to be raised with us. And we're going to raise him in the palace. We're going to teach him how to be an Egyptian. He's going to be well-trained. He's going to be a good leader so that by the time you die, your firstborn son can go back to that land and he can lead his people, but he's going to lead them as an Egyptian. And so it's somewhat normal for these princes of other nations to be raised in the palace with the Egyptian daughters as their moms. And it was never the other way around, because the other thing that would happen is these other nations, the daughters of these nations, would be sent to Egypt to become the wives of the Egyptians. What you never see in history is Egypt sending their daughters to these other nations to marry them. It only went one way. This is Egypt going, we're going to spread our power by spreading our culture, and we will get you to assimilate and become Egyptians. And Moses is this person. He lives in both worlds. He's raised both as a Hebrew and as an Egyptian prince. He is the prince of the Hebrew people. He's a prince of the Egyptian people. And like many Christians today, he's one of those people that has one foot in both worlds. He dresses and looks like the culture that he's raised in, but he knows that his identity is that of the people of God. And let me say, a lot of you wrestle with this dual identity as a Christian. Pharaoh's daughter, this is what it says. Says, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. So the woman took the baby and nursed him. And then verse 10 says, when the child grew older. So in that time period, they don't have formula. If you can't find a wet nurse, the child dies. And they had some recipes that usually didn't work, and the child would still probably die. And so normally when we say that he's being raised here, this is probably 5 years, maybe upwards to like 8 years of his life that he is being raised with his birth family. And so he spends the first several years learning his ethnic identity, knowing who he is, knowing who his people are, knowing what his culture is, knowing the God of his ancestors and his people. He spends the first formative part of his life having taught into him who he belongs to, and he's given a racial heritage, a racial identity. He knows who he is. And he gets older, and he's given back to the palace, And he goes and he's raised among the Egyptians. And there, as the Egyptian prince that he is raised to be, he has power, he has position, he has education, he has privilege. He gets the leadership training that only people in the palace ever had. He becomes this educated leader of people. And let me just say, do you see what God's doing? An Egyptian prince can never deliver God's people out of Egypt. An uneducated slave that doesn't know how to lead people and isn't taught how to lead people, whether Hebrew or not, could never leave God's people out of Egypt. And so what does God do? In the hardest season of his mom's life, in the hardest season of Moses' life, in the hardest decision that these midwives have ever made, God uses he uses every pain point in every hard season to build Moses into the person that God always intended him to be. And so by the time he's a grown-up, he has part of him that is a well-trained Egyptian prince, and part of him that is deeply Hebrew and knows the God of his people and understands what his purpose is in some way. And so then one day, he's grown up, and he leaves the palace, and he goes to these store cities, to either Pithom or Ramses, and he sees the slavery, the bondage of his people. And he immediately is forced to make a choice. Let me make sure you're getting it. God puts us in a situation at some point in our lives, before we experience him, before our lives are changed by him, God puts us in a situation where he goes, you have the beliefs of a Christian, you have the behaviors of a pagan, you have the values and the principles of your people, of my people, of the sons of God, and yet you look and act like the culture that you were raised in. And a lot of you, how many of you, you don't have to raise your hand, you came up in church, when you were a little kid, grandma, somebody brought you to Bible class, you learned the songs, you heard some of the stories, you were told about God, and at some point in your life, you went out into the world and you bought into the culture, and you left the church when you went to college, or you left the church when you got old enough to go, I want to be my own God, and I want to see what's out there for me, and I want to decide what my own identity is, and you end up one day living in both worlds. The Hebrew prince, the Egyptian prince, somebody that I know who I am. I know what my people believe. I know the God that my people worship, but I've lived in this culture. I look like the culture. I talk like the culture that I'm a part of. I was raised to live differently than the values that I was given when I was a child. And there's a lot of people in the church that I know that have one foot in both doors. And they're trying to somehow figure out, who am I? Because sometimes I feel more like the world than I relate to the church folks. And sometimes I feel more like the church folks than I relate to the people in the world. And when you're one of those people, you're fighting for who you are. You're trying to see God through all of the noise in your life. God will work a miracle in you where he will put you to a decision. And he will go, at some point, you got to choose. Who are you? Who do you belong to? And where are you going? And the question that you might have to answer, that some of you have been tested and answered, is, will you choose him even if it costs you everything? This is what happens to Moses. He goes out to where his own people were, and he watched them at their hard labor, and he sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew. There's both of his cultures literally warring against each other and fighting in this moment, and he has to pick a side. And I don't know if he realizes that this is the pivotal moment of his life. The Hebrew writer later on will, Hebrews chapter 11, we see this reference where he says that Moses refused to be called the son of Pharaoh. I don't know if it's this moment where he makes that declaration or if it's sometime later, but this is the moment where he picks a lane. This is the moment where he has to decide, who am I? Am I like the culture I was raised in, or am I like the people that I was born into? Who do I belong to? Am I somebody that follows the Lord, or just decides I'm going to worship whatever I can see in front of me and whatever feels good to me right now? And when you live in both of those cultures, you'll be put to the test. This is his test. He sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. And looking this way and that way and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian. He hid him in the sand. This is a great example of making the right decision the worst way. Right? This is the moment where, like, tell me if this is you, man. Like, we have people in this church. You give your life to Jesus. You come out of the waters of baptism. You're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. You're like, I'm indwelt by the Holy Spirit. I'm one of the good people now. I'm going to do all right. God got me. And then you mess up. Like, right out the gate, you blow it. You look like a fool. You sin in an ugly way. People begin to notice that you're not as holy as you're acting like you are. And all of a sudden, you don't know who you are. And you don't know who you belong to. And if you, like Moses, have enough privilege and have enough position and have enough eyes on you, you find that you're actually rejected by both cultures. The most recent example, we saw it with Shia LaBeouf during the whole Mardi Gras thing down here, right? He's trying to like just believe what the Bible says. He's trying to follow the Lord. He's trying to practice his faith, and he's just kind of doing it in some sloppy, messy ways sometimes. And he gets himself into trouble, and he's all over the news, and everybody's talking about it. And what do you see? You see the church go, he's not, we don't do stuff like that. He's not one of us. And the church rejects him. And you see the culture go, dude, what are you even talking about? We thought you were with us. And the culture rejects him. And now this dude's having to make the hardest decision he will ever have to make. Do I go back to the culture? Do I go back to the life of privilege and position where at least I'm accepted by someone, at least I feel significant somewhere? Or am I honest with who I really am, with who God is calling me to in the life that he has for me? Am I willing to take it knowing that to choose him is to often be rejected by both sides? My favorite example of this, y'all are going to laugh at me, is you can go look up this moment in history where Justin Bieber is singing at a worship night at a certain church, and like Chandler Moore is singing. He like the big dudes in the worship scene in contemporary Christianity are there, and Bieber's on stage, and he's sitting on a stool, and he's like sitting over here like this, and he's bowed down. And he's singing the worship songs, and and it's good. He's doing a good job, and he's praying, and he's singing, and you can see in this moment like he's doing everything he can to not make it about him, and that's so hard for him because he's that dude where like there's always eyes on him, right? And he's trying so hard to just worship God and to use his gift in a way that's God-honoring and not in a way that's going to draw attention to himself. And so, like, I like it when PD gets to sing with passion, when he gets to, like, engage all of us during worship. Like, Bieber in that moment knew he couldn't do that. If I look out at the stage, everybody's going to be looking at me, and then there's going to be videos going out about how, the worship is a spectator sport and everybody's just looking at me because I'm and he doesn't do any of that. He's so humble and contrite the whole time in the worship set. And you can see it and you're like this dude is trying to serve the Lord. He's trying to do it humbly and God honoring. But you can also pull up videos of him acting like an absolute fool and behaving terribly and doing things that Christians should never ever do. And because he's one of those people that actually got offered what Jesus has offered in the wilderness and what all the stories say that the devil tries to offer, that promise of I'll give you the world in exchange for your soul. And guys like that, man, it's like, if I say no, if I fight for my soul, I'll be rejected by the Christians because they've seen the videos of me acting foolishly. I'll be rejected by the world because they've seen the videos of me praying and acting foolishly in a worship set and trying to honor God. And you realize to really choose him, oftentimes as a Christian, costs you everything. It costs you your identity. You have scriptures like Galatians chapter 2, verse 20. I've been crucified with Christ. I no longer live, yet not I, but Christ dwells in me. And the life that I once lived, I now live by faith of he who saved me and set me free. It rhymes, and that's the only reason I can say it is because I remember the song. But there's that moment as a Christian where you go, man, to accept this, to do this, to believe this, to choose this, to go this direction is to have my old life gone, to be rejected, to be cast out, to no longer have the identity that I once clung to. Doesn't it give you a little bit of grace for these people with spotlights on their life when they seem to be stuck in this battle? Because they're not just choosing to follow Christ, they're choosing to follow Christ and in doing so lose everything, lose both sides of it. This is what happens to Moses. He makes the choice and immediately blows out the gate. Immediately. Look at this. In this moment, you see exactly these two identities. You see he who wants to choose his people. He wants to be God's son. He wants to be the prince of the Hebrews. His beliefs are good. His behaviors are pagan. His behaviors are still worldly. He has all of the violent pride, all of the arrogance that the Egyptian princes were known for. In this time in the world, if an Egyptian prince murders a citizen that's not a royal person, it's kind of like, did they deserve it? And you're like, yeah, they looked at me wrong. And it's like, okay, well, now they know their place, right? Like, it's a slap on the wrist. It's maybe a fine. It's a speeding ticket to these guys, right? He can get away with this. He could have gotten away. He could have ran back to Pharaoh and been like, Pharaoh, you don't understand. I'm choosing you. I respect, like, I'm a Egyptian prince, and I get to do what I want because I'm royal. He could have done that. And instead, this is what happens. The very next day, he goes out, and he really thinks, like, I did this good thing. I picked my side. I am the leader of the Hebrew people. Like, this is me, right? And he sees two Hebrews fighting. And he's like, why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew? Like, hey, we're all Hebrews here. We're supposed to fight the Egyptians. We're not supposed to fight each other. And they look at him and they're like, dude, who are you? Like, look at this. Who made you ruler and judge over us? Oh, what? Are you thinking about killing me like you killed that Egyptian? Right? In that moment, he realizes, when I chose you, I got rejected by both. I no longer have that identity. Then Moses was afraid. It's like, man, now everybody knows what I've done. The word's out. I'm done. Pharaoh's going to find out, and I either have to grovel and go back to him, or I'm gone. I'm going to be murdered. I'm now somebody that's the enemy of the Egyptian people. And so when Pharaoh heard, he tried to kill Moses. And Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. I'm leaving out a lot here. Moses meets his father-in-law, Jethro, who's a cool character. We're going to talk more about him. He marries his daughter. He marries Jethro's daughter, has a wife, begins to have a family. It's not at all the life that he thought he was going to have. He spends 40 years in the land of the Midianites. And by the time he's 80, his Hebrew identity has come to nothing. His training, his education in the Egyptian palace has come to nothing. He's not the leader of the Egyptian people. He's not the leader of the Hebrew people. He is a leader of a herd of sheep in a desert on a rock somewhere. And here he is, 80 years old, going, it was all for naught. I did the right thing, and was it worth it? And this is the question some of you guys are wondering, man. If I choose Jesus, if I put my faith in Jesus, if I become a Christian, if I get honest about the things I put my faith and trust in, and I beg God to set me free from that and let me see him so I can worship him. Like when you feel that tug of the Holy Spirit on your life and you're tempted to go, like maybe I'm the one that needs to come forward and get my life right and identify as a Christian. And as you guys get ready to make that decision, the question that's somewhere in the back of your mind is it worth it? What if? What if I'm wrong? What if I make the right decision and one day I'm 80 years old, and because I chose Jesus, I don't have my career, and I don't have the position I thought I would have, and I don't have the identity and the people that I thought I would have, and I've been rejected by the culture that I was once a part of, and I've rejected by the people that I tried to become a part of. What if I choose him and I get nothing out of it? And that's when I say, at 80 years old, Moses had every right to look back and go, I did the right thing, and it wasn't worth it. By 90 years old, he has parted the Red Sea. He has led his people out. He has yelled in Pharaoh's face, and he has watched God, the God of his people, of the Hebrew people, defeat every false god of the Egyptians. By the time he's 90, it's the last couple of decades of his life that he becomes the person that God had called him to be all along. And I say all that to say this, for time's sake, I can't believe I'm already at 55 minutes. For time's sake, let me say it like this, guys. He needed the first 5 or 6 years of his life to learn who he was and who his peoples were. God used that situation to teach Moses about himself so that he could be the person that would deliver his people. He needed the training in the palace. He needed to have the experience as an Egyptian prince to be able to lead people the way that they were able to teach him how to lead people. But it doesn't end there. He needed the 40 years in the wilderness. He needed the season of his life where all he did was tend sheep. By the time you get to the book of Numbers calls Moses the meekest man who ever lived, the most humble man in all the earth. When we leave him here in Exodus, he's a prideful, angry, arrogant, loose man that allows his faithfulness to God to be overcome by acts of violence where he has the right beliefs and the wrong behaviors, the beliefs of God's people and the behaviors of the Egyptian people, and he's trying to make sense of it all, and he goes into the wilderness, and after 40 years of tending sheep, he is humbled to the point that the Bible says he is meek and he is humble, and that's the situation that leads him to Exodus chapter 3. In Midian, there on the mountain, he meets God at the burning bush. And let me just say, if you haven't experienced God, if you're not a believer, if you're still going, God, are you going to deliver me? Are you going to set me free? Are you going to show up and transform my life? Could it be that God is still using every bad season, every tragedy, every crisis, every hard moment of your life to build you into the person that when God shows up in your life, you go, that's who I am, that's who I serve, and now I know where I'm going. God is working on you. He hasn't forgotten you. He hasn't abandoned you in the wilderness. He's still the God that shows up in your life and works all of it out for the good of those who know him, love him, and are called according to his purpose. Chapter 2 ends like this. During that long period, while Moses is away, the king of Egypt died, and the Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. And God heard their groaning, remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, looked over, he remembered, he heard them, he remembered his promise, he looked over at them and noticed them, or knew them, or acknowledged them, or was concerned about them. We don't know how to translate this because it's weird. God looked over on the Israelites and was concerned about them. I think that's the softest word out of any of our main Bible translations. Acknowledge them as good. But literally, the Hebrew word there is this word, he knew them. He knew them. God looks at you. He sees every mistake you've made. He sees the war of identities that's in you. He sees your cultural values and your political values and the faith that you're fighting for and all the doubts that you're wrestling with. And he's also seen and heard and remembered all the negative self-talk in the back of your mind where you feel like the midwives, you feel powerless, you feel insignificant, you feel like God's going to get his will done through the heroes of the faith, not through the small, insignificant people that nobody has ever heard of. He's seen your doubts, he's seen your fears, he's seen all of your insecurities. And the way it ends is when you cry out to him, when you finally go, God, I built my life worshiping false gods, putting my faith in the wrong thing, and I'm tired of trying to crouch all of that. And every tragedy and every crisis makes me realize the reason we run to the church during times of crisis is we realize we put our faith in the wrong things. And the things we thought would save us aren't actually saving us. Maybe there's something deeper. Maybe there's something more real. And we show up to the church, and when we cry out to him, the promise of God is, I haven't forgotten you. Of course I remember you. And I don't just see you, I know you. I know you. He says he looked at them and he knew them. He acknowledged them. Does that make sense to you? It's only in him. It's only in him that you are both fully seen and fully loved at the same time. It's only in him that he looks at you and says, I know you. I've seen what you've done, and I still choose you. As we call the band back up here, I had to look back to see if they were up here yet because I'm way past time, guys. As we call the man back up here, let me give you one more verse. Let me tie it home. God will use your hard situations to bring you to the person he's calling you to be. He uses the most insignificant and overlooked people, and he blesses them, and he raises them up. He uses their fearlessness and their boldness to change the world around him. He's doing it in churches today. He's using small churches and overlooked places to change the culture and change the world around them because they fear God more than they fear man. And yet, this is a quote from Tim Keller. I heard Tim Keller say, if I point you to the principles, but don't point you to the person, you'll get strangled by the principles. I'm like, that's a cool line. But here's what he meant by that. If I tell you, see, God will use your heart, so all you have to do is trust in him, you fear him, then what we do is we try to be our own Moses, right? We go, okay, well, I'll just be good enough. I'll be the good Christian. I'll choose him. I won't choose that. I'll choose my people and not the culture, and that'll be enough. And then you try to do enough. You try to be good enough. Or you use religion. You use all the things to try to prove to God that you're enough. And so instead of pointing you to the principles, I want to point you to the person. There's this moment where Moses, I've been talking about how Jesus shows up in the Old Testament. Here's a moment where Moses shows up in the New Testament. It's Luke chapter 9. This moment where he takes Peter, John, and James with him. And he goes up onto the mountain to pray. This is the transfiguration. It's a weird, mysterious moment in Scripture. As he's praying, the appearance of his face changed and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. And two men, Moses and Elijah, this is Peter, James, and John, 2,000 years later, or close to, are looking up and they're seeing on the mountain Jesus talking to their forefathers, Moses and the prophet Elijah. And he says they appeared in glorious splendor talking with Jesus. And they spoke about his departure and which he was about to bring to fulfillment at Jerusalem. Now, here's the neat part about this. We missed this in the English. Luke's being intentional here. He's got Moses up on the mountain. He's got Elijah up on the mountain in some form, in some way, in this mysterious moment. And the disciples of Jesus are able to see the connection between Moses and Jesus. And he uses the word exodus right here, this word for departure. He says, Moses is talking to Jesus about Jesus' exodus, about the time where Jesus would deliver his people. See, I'll just say it simply, and then we got to close, guys. This is my point, guys. Jesus is the one who, when they tried to kill all the boy babies to get rid of him, they sent him to the wilderness so that he could grow in strength and come back to be the Messiah that he was supposed to be. Jesus is the one that while Moses would choose to obey God at the threat of his life, Jesus is the one who chose to obey God at the cost of his life. It would cost him everything. Jesus is the one that by following the will of God gets rejected by the religious people and gets rejected by the Romans and the culture around him. And Jesus is the one that would end up encountering God up on the mountaintop. But instead of seeing God in a burning bush, instead of experiencing God and God telling him, this is who you are, it's the moment where he feels rejected by God. And in this moment where he cries out on the cross, he's like, I was in the Garden of Gethsemane and I prayed to God. My people rejected me. They fell asleep in the garden. And I said, not my will, but yours be done. And I get to the cross and God, I'm doing your will. And he looks up, he goes, my God, why have you forsaken me? And in that moment, what you see in Moses' life and what you see in Jesus on the cross is in that moment, it looks like the absence of God. It looks like God didn't show up, like God isn't there. There's darkness in the land. Jesus himself is saying he's forsaken by his Father, and yet it's in that moment that God is actually doing his greatest miracle and his best work. In your life, in your hard season, in your tragedy, when crisis comes into your life and you're like, God, why would you let this happen to me? Why have you abandoned me? Why did I chose you and I ended up in the wilderness? What's going on? And it's in that moment where God feels absent that we realize God is forming us. He's doing his saving work. This is what he does to deliver his people. And like Moses, Jesus doesn't just deliver those people in that time to that place. By pouring out his life on the cross as an offering for sin, Jesus is the greater Moses, because through that decision and through that miracle on the cross, he delivers all people of all time, of all nations and all tongues and all those who would bow and put their faith in Jesus, so that anybody who goes, man, I'm tired of living the double life. I'm tired of having one foot in the culture and one foot in the people of God, and I'm ready to choose to follow God. And it's anybody that does that. He says, I'll deliver you. I'm not just delivering you away from your bondage, away from your sin, away from your anxiety and all the things that you feel enslaved by. I'm delivering you to the God who really is worth worshiping. Let my people go so that they can worship me. Jesus on the cross is the greater Moses. He died to deliver you into the arms of the Father. What are you waiting for? He is true. He is good. He is lovely. Let him save you. Let's stand. Let's pray. And let's sing. God, we come to you thankful that in your Old Testament we get the stories. We get to see that you work in unlikely people. And you work in dark and hard, tragic situations. And you do it all to bring about your will so that you can deliver us from our bondage, from everything that weighs us down, and from all the false gods that we find ourselves worshiping. God, I just pray that you will put the people in this room to a decision. Make us choose. No matter the cost, God, help us to see you so that we choose you, so that you deliver us from our bondage, so that we can worship you. Lord, help us see you, that we can savor you. God, I just pray that you continue to work through the unlikely and the overlooked. Use messy Christians and broken people like the people of Riverside to change the culture and change the world around us. Help us be the people that get into good trouble, that do hard things for good reasons, and help us be the people that change the world in small, rebellious ways for our good and for your glory. We trust you with this. We put our faith in you by the power of your Holy Spirit. In Jesus' name we pray.